Allen Clary, welcome to the Post-Pandemic Pivot Summit. So excited to have you with us today. If you are unfamiliar with Allen, let me just make a brief introduction before we jump into our conversation. Allen, you're a speaker, a serial entrepreneur, a coach, a published author of the book Quit to Start, and you're on a mission to create 10,000 quitters. So I can't wait to hear more about that mission. But let's start at the beginning. What got you into the pathway of entrepreneurship?
Claudia, it is awesome to be here, and what a privilege it is to be part of your conference here, and what a great purpose post-pandemic, right? It's affected so many of us, and this will be a great event and content for people. All these wonderful speakers that you gather that will inspire and inform a lot of people. So first of all, congratulations to you, and it's an honor to be here. It's just I think the best way I can answer that question would be that I started living, grew up as a kid under a very strong father who went on to be an entrepreneur, made the leap himself. He wasn't always that way. We were kind of a poor family, so to speak, and he came from close to poverty, you could say, of the American type, and barely pulled through high school, but just really worked really hard and made his way up the ranks in a company and made it to the number 2 position of a company, kind of an engineering construction company, but realized he wasn't making very much money. The person making the money was the owner.
Yeah.
Right? It was a small company. In a small company, there's usually one person, if they're lucky, the one person that makes a lot of money. Everybody else does kind of okay. And he was kind of a critical piece of the company. He was the kind of the linchpin, like all the clients and customers loved him. The employees, like, it seemed unfair that he wasn't able to benefit in that, and he was not offered an ownership position. And so he eventually said, I have to make a leap. And so he made his leap. And I like to tell people I entered my high school as kind of a poor kid, so to speak, and left high school kind of one of the rich kid, wealthy kids, so to speak, in 4 years.
Wow.
My dad did this.
Wow.
He made the leap when I was in middle school, 8th grade, and by the time I was able to go to college, because of the wealth that he was able to create very quickly as a business owner, made the leap and was able to be an entrepreneur and own his own business. And from then on, built a multi-million-dollar business and became a multimillionaire himself. And so I got to watch that happen in front of my eyes. And plus, my father was a very driven person, and I was able to learn so much from his drive and determination. So that was number one. And I didn't start my first startup until my late 20s, after I left the family business. So that's another kind of tough story. Is I was, the plan was for me to work in that business, and I tried for more than 10 years, from age 15 to 28, but it wasn't for me. I was I was drawn to technology and startups, and also making my own way. And a lot like my father, I had to make my own way. So I left the family business, and it was okay. It was probably the best for our relationship, honestly, instead of working so close together. And I pursued a technology, and I had my first startup when I was 27 or 28, but that did okay. But I wanted to go work I wanted to go prove myself in Fortune 500, the big game, right? So I worked my way up through some large technology companies, implementing big software systems and doing big things. It was more of a personal challenge for myself of, could I do that? And I did that until it kind of burned me out. I really hit the wall there. And frankly, I was not only frustrated from working too much, but also just realizing that companies will use you up. If you have an entrepreneurial mindset and a lot of drive and energy, they definitely will kind of keep you in golden handcuffs and keep kind of giving you promotions. I talk about in my book that, it's called the promotions are not the answer, and management is not the answer. I made my way up through promotions and management, but I found myself less fulfilled, less happy, more overworked. And frankly, corporate was taking all that I was giving, and I wasn't able to create what I wanted to create in the world, not only from a wealth and freedom perspective, but just even from a creative perspective. I was very frustrated. Even though I was doing very well in corporate, I was very unfulfilled and grew more and more frustrated until when I was in my mid-30s, I had to make a big leap, and I did, and started my my next tech startup at that time. But a big leap it was. I mean, I left a six-figure job to do it.
I mean, it is so interesting what you just shared with us, right? Because first of all, the story about your dad, right? You were
Right.
right there. You had a first row seat in experiencing what it takes to become a successful entrepreneur. But that is
Right.
exactly the story that many of us are seeking when we jump into entrepreneurship, right? It really,
Right.
4 years is nothing. It took him
Yeah.
from zero to, highly successful to do that.
Yes.
And you were right there, so you gather some of these traits or learn something from you. But then your personal story, so many of us, especially now during the time, as you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, where we are still navigating this pandemic, many of us had great jobs like you're describing,
Right.
where we perhaps were making a lot of money, but we were missing something. And the one good thing about the pandemic is that for the first time, perhaps in our lives, it has given us the space to reevaluate what is truly important for us. And that had mean for many of us to jump ship, perhaps from wherever we're doing and start our own thing.
Right.
And we are following in your steps now, but many of us are at the very early stages of the process.
Right. Right.
So I'm curious, given your lengthy expertise, both as an observer and participant and creator of
Yes.
enterprises, have you ever feel stuck in your process? Like what you sound to be like the kind of person that is just experiencing one success after the other.
No, not at all. No, very much been stuck a lot of times. In fact, that's why I wrote my book, right? Quit to Start. That's why I wrote the book. I was inspired to write the book because I wanted to pass on some of the X's and O's, to use a sport analogy, and some of the structural mechanics of being successful in the startup world, and some of the misconceptions around it. Because I continue to stay in and out of like struggle or stuck, right? When I was building a venture-backed tech startup, I hit a stuck position there in terms of what it took to get investor capital and how to kind of continue to climb the venture capital ladder, which was a lot different than I'd imagined. And I think if everybody listening today has something in their mind about what that would be like, and I would assure you it's a lot different than what you would imagine. The things you think are true about it or not, and the things that are not. So it's like there was that. And then I also built just regular consultancy type, businesses that could be cash flow positive very quickly, and hit a wall there as well. And in fact, I talked about the Solopreneur Trap. The Solopreneur Trap is something that I experienced myself, and I watched a lot of other people experience it, where they, didn't kind of, made the leap to go do the thing they love and they're really good at, but didn't realize that, it would become an albatross at some point if you didn't have the right plan for success, right? Because you end up overworking yourself more than you did in your old job a lot of times, and you get less time off and less benefit, and maybe sometimes less money. There can be a lot of, and then you're kind of trapped out there and you don't know how to escape. And I hit that wall as well. And I wanted to write about these things in my book, so I wrote about all of that stuff. And just in general too, the third thing I wanted to write about was that I found that there was a disparity in wealth creation amongst the different types of startups, and the different types of startups that can be investable too. So people think that just any type of a company or startup is investable, and they get very confused and frustrated why investors don't just rush in to assist. And there's reasons for that. There's structural reasons for that most people don't understand. They just get rejected, or they get ghosted, or blown off, and they don't know why. And so I hit all of these things, and I watched my dad build a certain kind of business also that I chose not to build, and I watched all the success and challenges that he had. So I am a student of the game, and I love helping others kind of know before they go. I can't help you avoid, we can try to help people avoid, but I'm mostly interested in trying to explain how the game really works, so that you can play it well, and you can understand, even when you have setbacks or things don't go as you would like, you kind of go, oh, okay, that's how the game works over here. And you're not as just devastated or confused or shocked or frustrated. You kind of know the difference between creating a services company and creating a venture-backed tech startup versus being a physical product company versus being, a solopreneur, et cetera.
So there's a lot in your book. What I love about it is that, you actually take us to the process of thinking about all the areas that we didn't think about it when we just jump into these, what we see as a great opportunity right now.
Right.
And you speak a lot about the importance of like planning and really thinking and doing research. And, here we are, most of us have jumped into the process, and we may be experiencing exactly what you're saying, the first stages of like feeling stuck or not realizing that you could be creating just another job for yourself, and just as you described, one that is a lot more demanding than a 9 to 5, because you don't have the additional bonuses that come with a well-paid job. And you just hinted into one area that you really it's really well explained in your book, and that is exactly what you said about how the game really plays out, and we often don't learn about it until it's too late. So could you tell us just a little bit more about what that means for you?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, let's take something like investment, right? And investors, right? And these I'm referring to savvy investors, angel investors, but those that have experience investing. I find all the time startup founders are often confused about why what they're doing isn't attracting investors. Well, something called scalability, right? And it's not well understood by everybody. And people, even people who are not building scalable companies, will tell you that they are building scalable companies, and that's not really true. A scalable company is something that can grow and get less expensive as it grows. Okay, most things that you build, like services companies, for example, do not fundamentally get less expensive the more you go. They get harder. Services companies get harder to deliver the bigger you grow it, because the founder is very much in control of those services when you're close to it. But when it spreads out amongst more people and bigger geographies, you're less able to influence the services and the quality of those services. And by the way, typically with services, you have to hire more people, so nothing gets cheaper, and it gets harder to deliver with quality. It gets more expensive. Now, you can create a very successful business, you can create a lot of wealth and so forth, but generally, just for example, investors are generally not interested in services companies. That people don't immediately understand that, right? It's not that there's anything against services companies. In fact, the owners of services companies do very well if they perform well, right? But it doesn't usually leave a lot of excess profits for investors, right? So investors, especially experienced ones, are looking for outsized results, right? Outsized returns. And they're willing to take a lot of risk, and they're willing to do something that's maybe more speculative, but the chance for like really outsized, overabundant, profits, if you will. So things like software products and physical products, are very scalable. You make it like software, it's really hard to build it one time, but then to sell it to 10,000 people is fairly, it doesn't cost you anything more hardly, right? So you built it once, you sell it 1 million times, as Microsoft famously said. Physical products, really hard to design and create the first one and make it amazing and special. Takes a lot of time and money, but then once you get it, it's relatively easy to mass produce, right? And so other types of products can be virtual products as well. So virtual products, physical products, software products, things that can scale. Services companies can scale if you can find a way to formulatize it, if you can find a way to standardize it. The way, for example, a restaurant is fundamentally a services company, but the ones that learn how to franchise, they know how to kind of create the next, like Outback Steakhouse was founded in my hometown here in Tampa Bay, Florida. And, they perfected it, and they figured out how to try to open a restaurant yourself really hard, but then try to get 5 more to open that are running as good as the one that you run. It can be nearly impossible, but if you understand scalability, you can actually make even a services company scalable. It's just really much harder versus a product company. But that's just kind of on the investment side of the world of scalability, that costs have to drop as you grow on a per revenue dollar basis. And quality has to be able to carry out almost effortlessly, which is harder than it sounds.
And it is So it is so true, everything that you're saying, right? Like we come into this space and we're like so eager to start our
Yeah.
business, and we quickly learn that we have to master a series of areas of knowledge in order to do just that. But even before we get to a place where we can even consider scaling, um, you speak so clearly in your book about the solopreneur traps.
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
I wonder if you could guide us through that process. Oh, there's so
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
resources that you have shared in your book.
Yeah, the solopreneur trap mostly applies to a services company. Usually it's somebody who has a specific skill set, a services skill set, anything from a handyman or handywoman, contractor, all the way to a graphic designer, to a writer, a technical writer, or a writer of any type, to a programmer, developer.
Mhm.
Someone who has a skill set they're very good at, and they get paid very well for it, and they love doing it, and that's usually what gives them the impetus to make the leap, so they can go get paid instead of an employer. They can be paid directly. Sometimes they accumulate a small team to help them do it, but it's usually contractors, not necessarily like full-time employees. As you know, full-time employees has a big responsibility, right?
Mhm.
So solopreneurs often are like a wedding planner, a wedding
Mhm.
or event manager, right? On and on. Like they usually are solo, and they accumulate people to get a job done, and they find client after client, project for project. And what we find is that that's that case where, over the course of usually a few years, you find yourself in that dilemma of income that's very up and down, and very,
Mhm.
you don't know whether to go work on finding your next project or to deliver the one you have. Or sometimes you get too many that you have to stop finding your next project to try to get these done, and then you're always shorthanded. And then by the time you finish them, you often realize, oh, I don't have another project lined up. So
Mhm.
you a lot of
Mhm.
sloshing around of income and costs, and it can be very, very, very challenging. And then also you can grow to kind of like end up being so frustrated that you end up hating the thing that you loved in the beginning, because it's now associated with this very frustrating, challenging thing. So to avoid that situation, you know, com- founders who are building services companies, if they want to avoid that and also have an opportunity to create wealth, which is another thing that doesn't show up in that model I just gave you over time, is you've got to start getting used to the idea of building a company. So if you have a service in mind that you really love doing, you almost have to start thinking about divorcing yourself of the thing that you love doing. Sounds horrible, right? And it's really not something that most entrepreneur founders want to do, but you have to kind of make a big boy or big girl decision about this, right? And building a company means, instead of thinking about you doing the work, you might have to do a lot of the work in the first year or so, but at least if you have a plan that your mission is to hire your first employee, and to start building a team. And there's a lot of financial risk for you on that. There's a lot of extra hard savings and effort to do that. You have to actually do a lot of delayed gratification, and a lot of withhold of the lifestyle. Like you've got to sacrifice to be able to put your money towards your team, and kind of build it that way. That's how you are able to start having a company that can actually grow and deliver services, where you actually get some peace of mind, and you get some quality of life, and you get profits. And you're in a position to actually build something of value, even if you don't expand, even if you don't go to a different city or geography, and you don't actually scale out. You can actually, over the course of 5 to 10 years, if you build it that way, you actually can build something that's really valuable, that somebody might want to buy from you, or that will want to buy from you. And I have lots of personal examples of this in my network of folks that I've coached, and friends that have built services companies that went on to sell them for 5, 10, 15, 20, even $100 million in a single market, in a single fundamental location, with anything from 10 to 20 employees to a few hundred. And it's because but the founders stopped doing the actual work a long time ago, whether they meant to or didn't mean to, or however they got there, is the only way. So it's kind of a win-win. You get the rewards. I mean, I talk about in my book, right, this idea of what are the rewards of entrepreneurship. It's wealth and freedom, and wealth buys freedom, and peace of mind and quality of life, all these things. So if you can still do a little bit of what you love, but not putting yourself on the front lines, getting yourself off the front lines as soon as you can. And I talk about the 3 stages, by the way. The first stage is, taking yourself out of delivery, but you keep sales and marketing. So you're the most passionate, knowledgeable person about what you're doing. People still are going to buy from you. They still want to buy you as a service company. There's no way around that. So you still go out there and you sign the contract, sign the deals, proposals, you win the business, but you build your team to deliver. And that's really hard to get yourself comfortable doing. But that gets you to step 2, where you are basically, the company's able to deliver without you, but it can't really sell without you. That's fine. The next level, the third level, the ultimate level is when you can ultimately be able to hand over sales and marketing. And that takes 5-8 years sometimes. And then you have a real company that can operate without you. Now you have something that someone would buy. We can either do it as a follow-on question, but it's really important to know, if you have a services company, why nobody wants to buy your company, right? You want me to, Claudia, you want me to answer that one now? Because I think it's kind of fits in. Yeah.
Yes, we want to know.
I've I've had founder entrepreneurs come to me, and that I know personally, that spent, let's say, 5 years building a company with 100 employees even. But wanted to, got excited, like, I'm ready to sell, and the buyers would come around and do the due diligence and would not buy. Why? Because even at that size, that's a pretty extreme example, but you definitely see it with 20, 30 to 50 employees. Even they see that when they go look closely, the potential buyer sees that the founder, the CEO, is still way too involved in the company. And a buyer doesn't want to buy a company that really hinges on you as a founder. It's not a viable purchase opportunity, right? They're interested in buying companies that you can be easily removed, because they're going to pay you out, right? They might have you stick around, or they may or may not have you stick around. They need to know that they don't want you to stick around, that you don't have to, and you want that too, because you would love to have $5 million in your pocket. I mean, let's say you've been working 5 to 10 years building this thing, and somebody wants to give you $10 million cash. I've had people come up. I know that literally somebody wanted to give them $10 million cash, but couldn't because of this problem. They went back and spent at least another year figuring out how to remove themselves from the day-to-day operations, start delegating and management, and putting in processes and things that would be, and it's really hard. It's like your baby as an entrepreneur, really hard to do. So, but then this one person I'm thinking of went back and got that multi-million-dollar payout a year later. But they wish they had kind of known that in advance, because it was a jarring moment when they had an offer that they couldn't, there wasn't an offer that was sitting there, but because of their own misunderstanding of things, they couldn't exit the way they wanted to and when they wanted to.
I mean, that's such a powerful explanation of that could make a difference between a successful enterprise and one that will never go anywhere, even though it may be generating some income. But exactly, I don't think anybody starts a business because we want to be tied to it for the rest of our lives.
And we also don't start a business wanting to sell it one day. See, that's the dilemma. We don't think 5 to 10 years ahead. We're just so excited to do the thing we're going to do right now, which is great. But someone should explain to you where you need to be in 5 to 10 years, the options that you'll want to have. You want to be in a position, even if you don't sell, even if you don't choose to sell, you want to be in a position to sell if you want to. There's all kinds of things in life that can come up, and it's just something you don't want to find yourself down the road, completely kind of handcuffed to your business, and you can't escape it. And that sounds really hard for people in the first few years to understand, but it's a real nightmare during that period of time, because you've sacrificed so much to get there. You've sacrificed so much to not get the reward is really jarring.
I mean, even if we take back, actually, it's so eye-opening to have this conversation with you right now, because for so many people, as we mentioned earlier, that are starting their business, this could be a pivotal moment to think differently about what we're doing, right? So we perhaps we started our business because we wanted more time and freedom, but and wealth, of course, but those will not be sustainable if we don't have a clear long-term plan for what it is, whatever it is that we're doing. Even if we take the example that you gave us at the beginning of the conversation about your dad, who was incredibly successful. Like, I mean, that guy was like really successful. And
Yes.
but his plan, perhaps it wasn't his plan. He perhaps didn't have this roadmap that you're now describing, that you learn and develop by speaking with so many entrepreneurs. But his legacy, you were not the appropriate person to carry on the legacy. You had other interests, and your situation is not different than many of us, right? We don't think about that, and that could make or break our goals of wealth and
but
money
even
freedom.
the case, absolutely, and even in the case of my father's business, you know, if your children aren't wanting to take the business, you know, when you get to a certain point, you want to be able to sell your business.
Yes.
And it sounds so hard for early entrepreneurs to understand that, but one day you will want to sell your business and you'll deserve it, because that's where you're going to get 5, 10, 20 million, 50, I mean, a big number comes to you. And there you get to spend your 40s and your 50s enjoying the world, or maybe your, whatever that is, and enjoying the world, but then turning around and maybe starting the next thing, or or philanthropic causes, and so many wonderful, all these wonderful doors that open for entrepreneurs that sell their business. So
I mean, it's so interesting because you just hinted to another very important piece that is part of the evolution of the successful entrepreneur. So many entrepreneurs start with whatever it is that they started out, whatever business they started out, even in your story. But then you kind of like evolve and graduate to the next chapter of your life. Perhaps you, to your first enterprise, you discover that you started with this, but you really liked this other thing. So you develop, as a good entrepreneur, constant hunger of doing the next thing or the next project. But if you have not followed the advice that you just shared with us, it becomes a trap. And we can't move to the next.
And it takes years
excitement.
to get, it takes years to get out of the trap. Even if you able to recognize you're there, and then you get good coaching and advice on how to get out, it takes years, like, to get out of it. So it's something to really know before you go in, to avoid being trapped in.
Absolutely. So it sounds like there are a couple of steps, even as solo entrepreneurs, that we should take from the get-go to ensure that we are setting ourselves up for success. So it sounds like we should be very thoughtful about what's the long-term vision for our business, their capacity to grow, and how do we envision that this business will grow, and then how do we extract ourselves, how do we create the right environment to, from the beginning, have a plan to extract ourselves in the process and make it sustainable.
That's right.
It is incredible that we have covered so much in such a short time. I mean, now I like, if you know, I think that obviously the first thing everybody's going to want to do is to go out and get your book, which the link is right below this video, so people could get access to it immediately. But I want to shift a little bit, and I want to ask you a little bit, now that you have our attention and we are so focusing like the things that we have to do. You are on a mission to get 10,000 quitters. So tell us about that mission and how can we be part of it?
Yeah, that's right. And I need to get a little counter on my website, like a ticker, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because I imagine you're getting pretty close to it.
quittostart.com or planyourstart.com. And I need to definitely get the ticker going.
Yes.
It's a simple, mission. Here's the thing: every entrepreneur that you've ever know of, famous or not, had to make the leap and had to leave their job. I mean, Henry Ford had to do it even back in Henry Ford's days. And there's no way, very few entrepreneurs can be successful like out of high school or college. Very few. That's not even recommended. There's hardly enough experience in life to be successful at that point. Some do, but like the vast majority have to make a leap from a job. And so, in my book, I talk about a lot of famous a lot of famous quit to starters. Even Apple was formed by two quitters, right? Steve Jobs left Atari and Wozniak left HP. So it goes on and on. Every major brand, every company you can think of, everything you use today came from someone who had to quit to start. So I think that it's something that has to happen. So I felt like why shouldn't I be a part of that, helping the movement of that and helping people understand. By the way, I don't like to over encourage people to make the leap. In fact, in the book, I do a fair amount of scare tactics.
Yes,
because the water is a lot deeper than you even imagine and colder than you know about, and you should know that. And it's really not for everybody. It's for special people, really, that have an inner drive in their heart and in their minds, a determination that only they know about, that you can't put in them, right? This is something that people have in them. You have to just tap it and make the most of it. And so I don't like to over encourage people. Even with my class that I teach at University of South Florida, I open by saying, I'm here to inspire you to be an entrepreneur or inspire you not to be an entrepreneur. And I'm just as proud of those people that kind of come to the conclusion that it's not for them, whether they're reading my book or hearing me talk, because they've been saved from a lot of pain and agony, because it's a tough road. And so, but for those that do have it inside, that know they have to give it a shot, it constantly calls their name, so to speak. Then my next goal is to make sure they have as much of the playbook as possible that I don't see in other books. That's the other reason I wrote the book, is I have stacks of books, of course, entrepreneurship books, lots of how-to books, right? So I refuse to write a how-to book because there's so many of them out there. But there's not enough why books and what books, like what to do and why, right? And so the why is inside of you. It's a deeper thing, personal, that you tap, and that I don't have to put it in you. You have it. And the what is really the second half of my book, that gets into some of the things I said earlier about services companies versus product companies and all the points in between. And so many people get excited about something, not really knowing where that leads. Is that investable? Is that scalable? Is that, going to just make me a multimillionaire, but nobody else, like, is it going to create freedom for me? Is it going to create wealth? Am I going to be happy? Am I going to get stuck? Right. These are the things that I'm committed to. So I guess creating 10,000 quitters, one of my friends said that number should be a lot bigger.
Yeah,
he said, I said, you know what? But I'm going to keep it right there, because remember, I want to talk half of the people out of it. So, okay, maybe 2/3. Yeah. So 10,000 is just the small piece that's left over.
Well, that is definitely a really good goal, because even with this conversation today, you have put, yes, the fear of God in our hearts in so many areas that we perhaps didn't anticipate or didn't look out when we were starting our business. But you have also given us a lot of tools that we can leverage right away to course correct, if you will, our road into successful entrepreneurship. So I wanted to ask you, so it seems like there's two things in the works, but first, one more question before I ask you something else. Thinking about the audience that is listening to you today are a lot of solo entrepreneurs that perhaps are hearing for the very first time. You are right. The bookstores and Amazon and Google is filled with how-to. But what you're sharing with us today is actually very refreshing, because there is not many other places where you could hear what you just shared with us today. So what are 3 things that we can implement right away to kind of like course correct and put ourselves in a pathway for growth, as you have described today?
Right. Number one, think about how you can hire people in a team, which, if you've been a solopreneur or a small business owner, like, that's the thing you try to avoid normally, right? Yes. But I would challenge you to try to change your thinking. How can you come up with the budget to hire somebody for $50,000 a year? I mean, do it right, or 60, 80, whatever the number is, or 30, 40. But like, don't be cheap about it, and don't look for free, cheap, inexpensive help. Like, find professional people. And like, how can you put your mind, put your energy, your entrepreneurial genius and your entrepreneurial creativity into what do I need to do to be able to hire my first employee and commit to them on payroll and their families and their life. Like, it's a big deal. And make that your number one biggest sale, right? As an entrepreneur, right? And I think that changes your whole perspective. And then, how many part-time people can you also try to think about how you can put yourself under financial burden with a team. Mm-hmm. If it's a services company, right? If that will force you to get on the right path that we talked about earlier. If you are a products company, if you have a product idea, and if you are early on with a product, then you have a different kind of challenge. That one has less trap associated with it, other than, if your product is solving a problem or a pain point, then you should have no trouble making this go, because people will always pay money to solve a pain or solve a problem. So if you're having trouble selling your product or getting people to commit to it, then you may not be solving a big enough pain or a big enough problem. And sometimes people pursue product ideas that are more akin to their passion or something that they're excited about. But I have a chart in the book that talks about pain, pleasure, or passion. Like making sure that your product, the closer you are to the pain points of your prospective customers, the more successful you're likely to be. And I think those would be the two advices I would give for the two main kinds of businesses: services and product businesses.
That is very remarkable. So you have left us with so much hunger to stay in touch with you and learn more about you. So the first question before I ask you how to get in touch with you is there, did I hear correctly that there's probably a second book coming up after?
Yeah. I may have mentioned that to you the last time we talked. I plan to write it in 2022. I've got, a lot of outlines, a lot of notes. I've already started, working up some plans for it, but it's definitely something that I would be writing next year, because you just can't write one book. That was my thing. Is I need at least two. And
yes. Well, before you'll have a whole series, because there's so much
I don't know.
Unpack.
I'm gonna commit to two. Like, to me, I can't die until I've at least written two. So we'll see if more come. But I just feel like the thing is that I want a companion. I want the next step behind it, right? I want to write the book. When I stop, if you read my book, you'll see I came to a pretty abrupt end at the end. Like, I just stopped writing, and I was like, okay, there's definitely I have more to talk about, and really the next kind of step after you absorb the first book, like, okay, what is the next thing that you should absorb? And I want to definitely put that out there. It's a commitment that I've made to myself.
Yeah, we can't wait to get it, because this book has completely shifted the way that I personally think about my own business. So I'm hungry to understand, okay, so what do I do now? It is so unique, and I'm sure that as people get familiar with your work and are able to read the book, they will be begging, like I am, for more. So Allen, how can we stay in touch with you while we wait for the next book? How can we follow your work and learn more about what you're doing?
Sure, it's pretty straightforward. I'm on LinkedIn for sure, and you can easily find me on LinkedIn, Allen Clary. I'm also on Instagram. My name, ALLENCLARY. But you could search up Quit to Start, Plan Your Start, or my name, and you're going to find me on all of the different platforms. You can also just email me at Allen at Plan Your Start, or Allen at Quit to Start. They both work. I use both because some of my followers don't want their employers to know that they're following something called Quit to Start. So I have a safer public space called Plan Your Start, a little safer waters, but I do both, and that was the reason.
That is so true. That is so true. You put the fear of God in any.
I've got good friends who say, Allen, I'd love to follow your page, but I don't want my boss to see that. Okay. So we'll do something a little safer over here.
Well, I'm going to link your website and your contact and LinkedIn and Instagram in here, because I am sure there's a lot of people that will be very hungry to connect with you, as I had been. And I cannot thank you enough for your generosity. You have given us a lot to think about and very clear actions to take. So you have put a lot of people in a pathway, even with this short conversation, to start thinking about what we are doing with our business.
Well, Claudia, it's a pleasure. I love the opportunity to talk about these topics. I just feel it warms my heart to know that there's a few people out there that really resonated on this and connected, and it changed their thinking in a way that because I really want good outcomes for entrepreneurs. I know so many, including myself at times, that have just hit these really shocking, frustrating places, right? And I've seen some some stories that were really not great. And I just don't think that's fair. I don't think that's good. I think that entrepreneurs deserve better. They deserve the best chance at a great outcome. And when I talk about an outcome, I'm talking about where they are 5 to 10 years from when they start,
Yes.
and nobody really talks about that. And that's exciting to me to be able to move the needle on that. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I can't wait for this the conference you're doing, this post-pandemic conference, to air. I'm really excited. I'll be ready with my ready to watch as soon as you publish this, by the way. So
that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Such a pleasure. And I know we'll continue following you and all the work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Likewise, Claudia. I will be following you also.
Thank you.
Okay.